November 16, 1944. 06:45 hours, deep inside the Huichen forest, German-Belgian border. The air doesn't smell like pine needles. It smells like wet ash, cordite, and rotting timber. The morning mist clings to the forest floor, a thick gray soup that reduces visibility to less than 50 yards. It is cold, a damp, bone-gnawing cold that seeps through the heavy wool of an M1943 field jacket and settles deep into the marrow. You are lying prone in the mud, your body pressed into a shallow depression behind the gnarled roots of a shattered fir tree. Your world has shrunk to the circular image inside a Unertl 8-power scope. Sergeant Elias Thorne doesn't blink. His breath creates small, rhythmic plumes of white vapor that vanish instantly into the gray fog. Beside him, barely visible under a layer of burlap and dead leaves, acts Corporal Vance, his spotter. They have been in this position for 4 hours. They haven't moved. They haven't spoken. To speak is to die. To move is to die. This is the Huichen forest, the green hell. Here, the American war machine has ground to a bloody halt. The trees are so dense that artillery shells detonate in the canopy, raining jagged shrapnel downward like steel rain. But the shrapnel isn't the only thing hunting the men of the 4th Infantry Division. "Tree line, 11 o'clock, Vance whispers. The sound is barely a breath, virtually inaudible to anyone but Thorne. "The pillbox," I saw a glint. Thorne shifts his aim, micro-adjusting the knurled dials on the scope mounted to his Springfield M1903A4. The rifle is a precise tool, a bolt-action relic in a war of semi-automatic firepower, but in Thorne's hands, it is a surgeon's scalpel. He finds the target. It's a reinforced log bunker buried deep into the slope of the ridge. A German sniper has been operating out of that sector for 3 days. He has already claimed 7 GIS, mostly lieutenants and radio men. The German is good. He shoots from deep cover through loopholes, small firing ports that are barely wider than a coin. "I see him," Thorne murmurs, "or I see the shadow of him." Thorne chambers around, but this isn't the standard .3006 6M2 ball ammunition. Earlier that morning, back at the forward command post, a frantic supply run had brought up crates of ammunition salvaged from a downed P-47 Thunderbolt, and a stash intended for anti-material testing. Among the standard belts were loose rounds with tips painted a distinct, ominous silver blue. Incendiary explosive. Technically, under the Hague Convention, the use of explosive projectiles under 400 grams against human personnel is prohibited. It is considered inhumane, a war crime to inflict superfluous injury. But the Huichen forest is a place where the Hague Convention goes to die. The rules of civilized warfare do not penetrate this canopy. Thorne looks at the bolt of his rifle. He knows what sits in the chamber. It is a round designed to rupture fuel tanks to ignite. Aviation gas to shatter the engine blocks of trucks. It contains a small charge of chemical explosive in the tip, designed to detonate on impact. The GIS call them spotters. The Germans, facing similar horrors on the Eastern Front against the Soviets, have a different name for them: Teufelschuss, the devil's shot. "Wind is negligible," Vance whispers, his binoculars fixed on the dark slit of the German bunker. "Range, 350 yards. He's waiting for the patrol to cross the fire break." Thorne tightens his grip on the stock. The wood is slick with moisture. The problem with a standard ball round at this distance, against a target this dug in, is penetration without effect. A standard bullet might punch through the rotting log shielding the German, but unless it hits a vital organ directly, the enemy sniper can wrap the wound and keep fighting. Or worse, the wood slows the bullet just enough to make it non-lethal. Thorne needs something that doesn't just penetrate, he needs something that destroys. "Patrol is moving up," Vance warns. "German is gonna take the shot." Thorne feels the familiar tension in his trigger finger. The pad of his index finger rests on the curved steel. He exhales, emptying his lungs to steady the reticle. The crosshairs settle on the dark void of the bunker's firing port. He isn't shooting to wound. He isn't shooting to suppress. He is about to introduce a level of violence that will haunt the enemy's nightmares. Send it, Vance whispers. Thorne squeezes. The Springfield kicks hard against his shoulder. The sharp crack of the rifle is swallowed instantly by the density of the forest, a flat whip-crack sound that echoes briefly before dying out. Downrange, 350 yards away, the laws of physics and chemistry collide with the brutality of war. The bullet covers the distance in a fraction of a second. It threads the needle, bypassing the heavy timber of the bunker and striking the edge of the firing port's frame before deflecting inward. Standard physics dictates a ricochet, but this is an explosive round. Upon impact, the physics of the engagement shift violently. A standard 150-grain lead bullet would have mushroomed against the oak beam, perhaps splintering the wood, sending jagged fragments into the bunker's interior. It relies on kinetic energy, mass times velocity. But the round Thorne just fired relies on chemistry. As the silver-tipped projectile strikes the hard edge of the firing port, the thin copper jacket collapses instantly. Inside the nose, a volatile mixture of fulminate and incendiary compound is crushed. The deceleration force triggers the primer. There is no thud. There is a sharp, unnatural pop, like a firecracker detonating inside a tin can. Through the unearthly scope, the image is jarring. Thorne doesn't see the usual puff of dust or the spray of wood chips. Instead, a brilliant, blinding flash of blue-white light erupts from the bunker's aperture. It lasts for a microsecond, a miniature lightning storm contained within a few cubic feet of darkness. Hit, Vance. Breathes, his voice tight. Mother of God, did you see that flash? Silence rushes back into the clearing, heavier than before. The German rifle does not return fire. The anticipated crack of the Mauser K-98 never comes. The spotter round was designed for air-to-air combat, intended to show a pilot where his machine gun fire was striking an enemy fuselage by producing a visible flash and a puff of smoke. When applied to a human target in a confined space, the effect is gruesome. The detonation doesn't just drill a hole, it shreds. The small explosion creates a localized shockwave, turning the bullet's own jacket into jagged shrapnel while simultaneously igniting any flammable material nearby. Down in the ravine, the American patrol freezes. They heard the strange report of the hit, a sound distinct from the usual rifle fire. It sounded mechanical, industrial. Clear, Vance whispers, though he doesn't sound convinced. He's watching the aperture. There is no movement, a thin wisp of acrid, black smoke begins to curl lazily out of the bunker's slit, drifting up into the mist. They're moving up, Thorne says, cycling the bolt. He catches the spent casing as it ejects. He doesn't let it hit the ground, he inspects it for a split second. The brass is hot, the primer dented deep. He pockets it, no evidence. The patrol leader, a sergeant from the 22nd Infantry, cautiously approaches the log structure. He waves two men forward with Thompson submachine guns. They flank the blind side, kicking the mud from their boots as they scramble up the wet embankment. One of them tosses a grenade, just to be sure, but Thorne knows it's unnecessary. The duel is over. The GIS kick open the rear door of the dugout. Thorne watches through his scope as the soldiers disappear inside. Seconds tick by. One of the soldiers reemerges almost immediately, stumbling slightly, pulling his scarf up over his nose. He bends over, hands on his knees, retching into the dead leaves. The patrol leader steps out next. He looks up toward the ridgeline, scanning the trees where he knows the Overwatch snipers are hidden. He doesn't give the thumbs up. He doesn't wave. He just stares, his face pale even at this distance. He taps his helmet twice, the signal for target neutralized, but the motion is slow, hesitant. What did he see? Vance asks, lowering his binoculars. Thorne, what the hell did that round do? Thorne rests his forehead against the stock of the Springfield. He knows exactly what the round did. He's heard the stories from the armorers. The explosive charge detonates on contact with bone or equipment. It doesn't leave a clean exit wound because there is no exit. The energy is expended entirely inside the target, liquefying tissue and shattering bone into 1,000 secondary projectiles. It is a weapon of terror. It did the job, Thorne says flatly. Pack up. We need to relocate before their spotters triangulate the shot. That flash gave us away. They move with practiced fluidity, dismantling their hide. Thorn wraps the scope in canvas, but his hands feel heavy. The thrill of the perfect shot, the marksman's pride, is absent. Usually, a sniper duel is a test of skill, patience, and geometry. This felt different. This felt like an execution using a method the enemy couldn't possibly anticipate. As they crawl backward through the underbrush, dragging their gear through the freezing mud, the reality of the escalation sets in. They have just introduced a new variable to the Huichin meat grinder. The Germans are disciplined, veteran soldiers. They know the sounds of war. They know the wounds of war. When they find that body, when they see a wound that looks like an artillery burst happened inside a man's chest, they will know the rules have changed. And the Germans are not a people who leave a debt unpaid. Thorn glances back one last time at the smoking bunker. The mist is swallowing it up again. The forest is quiet, but it's a deceptive quiet. They have kicked the hornet's nest, and the buzzing is about to begin. November 19th, 1944, 21:00 hours, Company K Command Trench. 3 days have passed since the shot at the pillbox. The forest has not forgiven them. Night in the Huichin is never truly dark. It is illuminated by the flickering orange glow of distant mortar flares and the erratic strobing of artillery blasts on the horizon. But tonight, the atmosphere is different. There is a tension in the air that transcends the usual fear of death. Thorn sits on an ammo crate, cleaning the bolt of his Springfield by the light of a shielded lantern. The metal gleams with oil. He works methodically, his hands steady, but his eyes are tired. Dark circles hang heavy under them. "You hear the radio traffic?" Vance asks. He is leaning against the sandbagged wall of the dugout, nursing a tin cup of lukewarm coffee. He hasn't looked Thorn in the eye since the pillbox. "I don't listen to the radio, Vance. I just listen to the wind," Thorn replies, not looking up. "Intelligence picked up chatter." Vance presses, his voice low. "The Krauts, they're spooked. They found the guy in the bunker. Apparently they couldn't even identify him at first. They're saying we're using illegal ordnance. They're saying we're butchers." Thorn pauses, the rag halting midway down the bolt carrier. "We're in the Huichin, Vance. We're all butchers." "They have a name for it," Vance whispers. "Teufelschuss, the devil's shot. They think we've got some kind of experimental cannon condensed into a rifle. The prisoners the 12th Regiment brought in. They're terrified. They say the SS are threatening to execute any American sniper captured with that ammo on them. Summary execution. No POW camp, just a bullet to the back of the head." Thorn slowly reassembles the rifle. The click of the bolt sliding home is loud in the cramped dugout. He reaches into his webbing and pulls out a stripper clip. The tips of the bullets are painted that distinct, damning silver blue. He looks at them, they look innocent. Enough small pieces of metal. But he knows the chemistry inside is a war crime waiting to happen. The Hague Convention of 1899 was written by men in suits in clean rooms, men who had never tried to dig a determined enemy out of a frozen log bunker in a forest that eats battalions whole. "If they catch us with these," Vance says, gesturing to the clip, "we hang, you know that." "Then don't get caught," Thorn says, shoving the clip back into his pouch. Suddenly a strange sound cuts through the night air. It's not a shell, it's a voice. From the German lines, less than 400 yards away, a loudspeaker crackles to life. The audio is distorted, tinny, echoing off the trees like a ghost. "Amerikaners," the voice is smooth, speaking perfect, unaccented English. "We know what you are doing. We know about the exploding bullets. This is not the conduct of soldiers. This is the work of criminals." Every head in the trench lifts. Soldiers stop eating. A radio man pulls off his headset. "The German soldier fights with honor," the voice continues, the propaganda dripping with calculated malice. "But you bring the devil's fire, be warned. For every German soldier who dies by this cowardice, we will show no mercy. The forest sees you, the forest knows." A profound silence follows the transmission. Then, a single mortar round whistles in, detonating harmlessly 100 yards down the line, a punctuation mark. Thorn stands up, slinging his rifle. The psychological game has begun. The Germans are trying to isolate the snipers to turn the regular infantry against them to make them pariahs within their own ranks, and it's working. He sees the looks from the other men in the trench, riflemen, machine gunners. They look at Thorn with a mixture of awe and revulsion. They appreciate the kills, but they fear the method. "Where are you going?" Vance asks, panic flaring in his eyes. "To work," Thorn says. "If they're talking, they're scared, and if they're scared, they're making mistakes." "They're not just talking, Elias," Vance hisses, grabbing Thorn's arm. "They've brought someone up. I heard the scuttlebutt from the scouts, a specialist, a Yeager. They brought him in specifically to hunt the men using the explosive rounds." Thorn looks down at Vance's hand, then up to his spotter's face. "Good," Thorn says, his voice cold and hollow. "Let him come. I'm tired of shooting static targets." Thorn climbs out of the relative safety of the dugout and into the mist. He knows the game has shifted. It is no longer about territory or attrition. It is a personal vendetta. Somewhere out there in the black tangle of the green hell, a German counterpart is waiting. He is likely checking his own gear, smoothing his own camouflage, and loading his own rifle. But the German is fighting for honor, for the rules of war. Thorn is fighting for survival. And in the Huachin, the man who fights dirty is the man who goes home. He touches the pocket where the silver-tipped rounds sit. They are heavy, heavier than lead. They are the weight of his conscience, and tonight he will fire them again. November 21st, 1944, 14:00 hours, Sector 309, the dead zone. The rain in the Huachin forest doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the mud deeper. It's a freezing, sleet-mixed downpour that turns the foxholes into sumps and makes the trees weep. Sergeant Thorn and Corporal Vance are pressed into the ruins of a stone springhouse, the roof long gone, blown away by 105 artillery. They are overlooking a desolate stretch of logging road that cuts through the valley floor. For 2 days, they have been hunting the phantom. The German sniper, the Yeager, is good, better than good. He moves like smoke. He has already put a bullet through the canteen of a GI just to gauge the range and shot the radio antenna off a captain's back. He is toying with them. He knows they are out here. "Movement," Vance hisses. He doesn't lower his binoculars. "By the overturned half-track, bottom of the draw." Thorn slides the Springfield forward, the barrel wrapped in burlap to break its outline. He finds the wreck in his scope. It's a rusted skeleton of a German SD, KFZ, 251, lying on its side in the mud. "I don't see him," Thorn whispers. "He's there," Vance insists. "I saw the birds lift, just 2 of them. Something disturbed them." Then the bait is taken. A young American private, a runner carrying satchel charges for the engineers, breaks cover 300 yards to the left. He's moving fast, head down, splashing through the muck. Crack! The sound is sharp and disciplined. The runner drops mid-stride, clutching his thigh. He screams, a high, thin sound that cuts through the drone of the rain. He tries to crawl, dragging his shattered leg. Crack! A second shot kicks up mud inches from the runner's head. He's not finishing him, Thorn realizes, his stomach tightening. He's fishing. The German is using the wounded boy as a lure. If a medic runs out, the medic dies. If Thorn takes a shot to suppress the German, Thorn reveals his position. It is the oldest trick. In the book, cruel and effective. "Don't shoot, Elias," Vance warns, reading his partner's mind. He's waiting for the muzzle flash. He knows we're in the sector. Thorn scans the area around the half-track again. The German is smart. He wouldn't be in the vehicle. He'd be using it as a shield. Thorn traces the lines of the wreck. Then he sees it. A darker shadow behind the heavy steel road wheel of the half-track. A loophole has been improvised between the wheel spokes and the armor plate. The German is prone, almost entirely protected by inch-thick steel. He is invincible to small arms fire. A standard .3006 ball round would splatter harmlessly against that hardened steel. The German knows this. He has created a fortress in the middle of the field. He can pick off the runner, then the rescuers, and there is nothing the American infantry can do about it without calling in mortars, which takes too long. Thorn reaches into his pocket. His fingers brush the cold brass of the special clip. He's behind the road wheel, Thorne says. Steel plate cover, I can't penetrate it. Then we wait for artillery, Vance says. If you shoot, he sees us. If you don't kill him in one shot, he puts a bullet through your eye. The kid doesn't have time for artillery, Thorne mutters. The runner's screams are getting weaker. The freezing mud is claiming him. Thorne bolts the rifle. He loads a single round. The silver-blue tip gleams dully in the rain. Elias, that plate is hardened steel, Vance hisses urgently. That round is explosive, not armor-piercing. It'll just detonate on the surface. You'll just piss him off. I'm not aiming for the plate, Thorne says, his voice eerily calm. He settles his cheek against the wet stock. The crosshair dances slightly, then steadies. He isn't aiming for the German's head or chest. He can't see them. He is aiming for the gap. The narrow, 6-inch space between the road wheel and the ground where the German's face must be. Position to see the scope. It's a geometry problem. If he hits the mud swallows the explosion. If he hits the wheel directly, the wheel absorbs the blast. He has to hit the inner rim of the steel wheel, just inches from the German's face. Wind half value left to right, Thorne whispers. He breathes in, the smell of wet pine and blood, the sound of the rain, the screaming boy. He breathes out. He squeezes the trigger. The Springfield bucks. The report is loud, instantly giving away their position. Downrange, the physics of the Teufelschuss engage. The bullet strikes the curved steel lip of the road wheel. It doesn't penetrate. It detonates instantly on the hard surface. Flash. A brilliant, violent sphere of superheated gas and shrapnel erupts in the confined space beneath the vehicle. The sound is a sharp, metallic crump, distinct from a gunshot. The scream from behind the half-track is not from the runner. It is a different voice, guttural, shocked. The German. Rifle clatters out from behind the wheel, landing in the mud. Then silence. Did you get him? Vance asks, binoculars trembling. Check it, Thorne says, cycling the bolt immediately, keeping his eyes on the target. Nothing moves behind the half-track. The trap is sprung, the bait is safe. Minutes later, a squad of GIS, emboldened by the silence, scrambles out to grab the wounded runner. Two of them detach and sweep around the back of the wreck, Thompson submachine guns raised. Thorne watches through the scope. He sees the GIS stop. He sees them look down at the ground behind the wheel. One of the soldiers recoils, turning his head away. The other leans in, staring with morbid curiosity. The soldier looks up at the hillside, toward where the shot came from. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't wave. He just stands there, looking at the invisible sniper with a mixture of gratitude and horror. Target neutralized, Vance confirms, lowering the glass. Jesus, Elias, the splash. Damage. Thorne engages the safety. He doesn't feel triumph. He feels a sickness in his gut. He didn't outshoot the German, he out-teched him. He used a cheat code. He used a weapon that turned a near-miss into a kill. Let's move, Thorne says, his voice rough. They'll be mortaring this position in 2 minutes. As they slide back down the ridge, leaving the springhouse behind, Thorne wipes the rain from his face. But he can't wipe away the image of what that round must have done in that small, enclosed space. They have won the duel, but the cost of the victory is etched on the faces of the men who saw the aftermath. The devil shot has lived up to its name. December 8, 1944, 11:00 hours, rear echelon rest area near Rochen, Germany. The Huichen forest is finally behind them, a dark smear of jagged pine on the eastern horizon. The 4th Infantry Division is being rotated out, replaced by fresh troops who have no idea that they are walking into a meat grinder. The rest area is a muddy field of tents and steaming field kitchens. It smells of diesel, wet wool, and cheap tobacco. It is the smell of survival. Sergeant Thorne sits on an overturned jerry can near the edge of the motor pool. He is scraping the mud off his boots with a bayonet. The mud is stubborn, caked deep into the leather, mixed with the detritus of the forest floor. He looks older than he did 3 weeks ago. The lines around his eyes are etched deeper, and his hands have a permanent, subtle tremor. The shakes. the men call it. Corporal Vance approaches, holding 2 mess tins of hot stew. He hands one to Thorne without a word. They eat in silence, listening to the distant rumble of convoys moving toward the front. The war is moving on. The Battle of the Bulge is only days away, though they don't know it yet. Sarge, Vance says quietly, looking around to ensure no officers are nearby. The rumors are spreading. The MPs are asking questions about unauthorized ordnance. They found more German bodies with unusual wounds. Thorne stops eating. He stares into the gray slush at his feet. The devil shot had done its work. It had terrified the enemy, neutralized high-value targets, and kept Thorne and Vance alive when the odds were stacked against them. But in the cold light of the rear echelon, away from the adrenaline of the kill zone, the moral calculus feels different. The Geneva and Hague Conventions feel like abstract concepts when you are freezing to death in a foxhole, but they are the only things that separate a soldier from a murderer in the eyes of history. The use of explosive projectiles against personnel is a line that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. Thorne reaches into his field jacket. He pulls out a heavy canvas pouch. It clinks softly. "Walk with me," Thorne says. They leave the camp, walking past the rows of parked Sherman tanks and deuce-and-a-half trucks, until they reach a bomb crater on the edge of a frozen turnip field. The crater is filled with murky, stagnant water and trash. Rusted ration cans, broken crate slats, bloody bandages. Thorne opens the pouch. Inside, 3 stripper clips of silver-tipped ammunition gleam in the winter light. The lethal chemistry, the fulminate of mercury, the incendiary compound, it all looks so innocuous, just small copper and lead cylinders. He holds them over the water. "They say it's a war crime," Vance whispers, watching the rounds. "It's war, Vance," Thorne replies, his voice weary. "The artillery turns men into pink mist. The flamethrowers cook them in their boots. We just found a faster way." But despite his words, Thorne knows. He knows that the sniper trade is intimate. An artilleryman kills coordinates. A pilot kills infrastructure. A sniper kills a man he has watched breathe. To use an exploding bullet is to violate the strange, silent respect that exists between marksmen. It is a cheat. It is a cruelty. Thorne opens his hand. The clips fall. They hit the water with a dull plop and vanish instantly into the murk. The ripples spread outward, disturbing the reflection of the gray sky before the water settles back into stillness. "It never happened," Thorne says. "What never happened?" Vance asks, meeting his gaze. "Exactly." They turn back toward the camp, toward the warmth of the fires and the next mission. They are survivors of the green hell. They have left their innocence in the forest, buried alongside the shattered trees and the frozen dead. The history books will write about strategy and generals. They will mention the Battle of Huichin Forest as a tactical failure, but they will not mention the silver-tipped bullets. That story belongs to the mud. Narrator VO. The use of explosive spotter rounds by U.S. snipers in World War II remains one of the conflict's shadowy, debated chapters. While intended for aviation and anti-material use, the desperation of infantry combat often led soldiers to use whatever tools gave them an edge. The Germans called it Teufelschuss. The Americans called it survival. Technically illegal under international law, these rounds inflicted horrific damage, capable of vaporizing bone and tissue upon impact. Reports of their use were suppressed, evidence was buried, and the men who fired them took the secret to their graves. War forces humanity to confront uncomfortable truths. When the difference between living and dying is a fraction of a second and a single trigger pull, does morality still matter? Or is the only crime losing? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden history of WWII snipers, make sure to like and subscribe to the Old War Sniper Chronicles. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a mission briefing. From the front lines to the history books, we keep the aim true. Until next time.